welcome everyone to our first ever Inclusalytics Q&A live stream. I'm really excited to spend the next hour or so, we might wrap up a little early, to answer any and all questions that y'all have about Inclusalytics, about data-driven DEI. So a little bit of background about why we decided to have this Q&A today. So the second anniversary of the book was officially at the end of March, which is very exciting. And I had went to a conference, the Society of Industrial Organizational Psychology, in April. And I was just blown away by how many people who came up to me and said that they use the book at their organization, that they read the book, they use it in their practice, they recommend it to others. And so aligned with the 2-year anniversary and all of this, just great feedback we're getting on the book, we started the Inclusalytics Practitioner Network. I'll be sure to drop that link in the comments. It is a completely free group here on LinkedIn, if that's where you're watching this video. If you're not watching this video on LinkedIn, be sure to go over to LinkedIn and look for the Inclusalytics Practitioner Network. We opened that in April of this year, and we already have almost 200 group members. So we are about to hit the 200 mark. I'll have to share a special post whenever we do that. And something I've noticed in the group, although I do share a weekly resource, so something related to Inclusalytics, data-driven DEI, we haven't had as much conversation as I would like. And so that's why we're having this Q&A today, to really start the conversation when it comes to data-driven DEI and Inclusalytics specifically, but DEI and data broadly. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm thrilled to join you this morning on a nice Wednesday morning to talk about DEI and data. And so I tried to get some questions before the call. Please put your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat to see how the questions come in. So please be sure to put those questions in the comments, put it in the chat so I can get those and answer those live on the call. But we did have a few questions come in advance. And so I wanted to share the first one there, and I have a lot of resources to share with that. So just one moment, bear with me. Okay, our first question today is, let me go over here. What are the best resources and tools for an organization starting to measure their current DEI efforts? For practitioners, what are the top 3 to 5 readings or resources recommended when implementing DEI initiatives? So thank you to Ashley McCormick for giving us that question, and whoever liked it as well. And so let's start off with the best resources and tools. So one resource that I found that is publicly available, because I wanted to make sure anything I shared today is a free, publicly available resource for you. Of course, if you wanted to dive deeper into any of this work, bringing on an external expert could be the right move for that. But today I wanted to share free, publicly available resources. So the first resource I wanted to share is this DEI metrics inventory, and I found it on the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. So give me a moment to share my screen. All right. And so what you can see here is they broke down, and this is work done by Gartner, but for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, they broke down 5 areas of DEI. So we have first DEI and HR function. So looking at headcount and budget, government requirements, recruiting efforts, sourcing channels, talent management, and then moving into workforce. So you see that representation at the top there. I feel like that's usually where DEI metrics start and end. And you can see there's so much more on this table than just the representation, although that is very important data. So percentage of diverse talent, I can't stand that word, percentage of demographic groups, I would prefer. There's no such thing as a diverse candidate, a diverse, person. Diversity at its true core is at the group level. And so we all fit into that diversity picture. And so what is the breakdown of these subgroups across your entire workforce? And that can be whether they're underrepresented or overrepresented. We need to know what all those numbers look like. And also not just the whole workforce, but senior leader representation and also board representation. And so, but it shouldn't stop there. It talks about mobility, talks about engagement, turnover, training, compensation. Then we get into leaders. So how are leaders, what is representation among leaders? What's the involvement of leaders when it comes to DEI efforts? Resource groups, whether you have employee resource groups, business resource groups, affinity groups, and then enterprise-wide. So looking at policies, thought leadership, supplier diversity. It's a really comprehensive inventory. I also like the questions that they have at the beginning. So, what categories would you prioritize based on your DEI strategy? How would you adapt these metrics to best demonstrate progress? How would you adapt these metrics to highlight organizational needs? And which of these metrics could help you to compile a compelling narrative for stakeholders about DEI progress? So let's stop sharing my screen there. So that's the first resource, and I'll make sure to drop that into the chat for you all. Let me do that now. And once again, that came from the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. And that's what that looks like there. And I'll be sure to drop that into the chat so you could actually click on that link. So that's the first resource, the DEI metrics inventory. All right. The next resource I wanted to share with you comes from, and I'm previewing the second question, which is what are the 3 to 5 go-to resources? Data-Driven DEI by Dr. Randall Pinkett. I say Inclusalytics is a really approachable text, and that's also going to be one of my recommendations. If you haven't read the book and you're trying to do more data-driven DEI, Inclusalytics, I can't recommend that enough, although of course I am biased. But Dr. Pinkett's book really takes a deeper dive to that next level. And so if you're trying to really play that, DEI analyst sort of role, this is a great resource for you. But what Dr. Pinkett did is he shared a number of free tools and metrics on his website. So if you go to datadrivendei.com, free tools and metrics, you have a KPIs library, DEI measures and metrics library, strategic plan, DEI strategic plan template. So a scorecard, he just has a ton of resources on here. And so I'm not going to sign up right now to download these, but all you got to do is just sign up. They are completely free. A really nice supplement to have to the book, Data-Driven DEI. So that would be my second resource I would recommend for you all. And I'll go ahead and put that on the screen. So thank you, Dr. Pinkett, for providing those resources for all the listeners and viewers out there. And I'll be sure to share those into the chat as well. My third recommended resource is the GDEIB. Unfortunately, this is the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging benchmarks. And there's, nearly 100 different scientists and DEI experts involved in the creation and the update of this. They are currently updating their website. And so the most up-to-date version I was able to find is this one here from 2021. Rest assured, they should have a new version out here soon, but I just wanted to walk you through some of the highlights of the GDEIB and how you could use that in your efforts. In Inclusalytics, we talk about conducting an equity audit and looking at all of your organization's policies, practices, procedures, all the different areas of DEI, and seeing, do we have these different pieces in place, or are we missing? Where are the gaps? How are some groups benefiting from certain aspects of our organization and others are not? And I feel like the GDEIB is a great way of conducting that organizational audit for yourself. And so let's go ahead and I will share my screen there. All right, so just wanted to go to the beginning. So it's the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks, and it was, it does have a global lens, which I think is a really big benefit. 112 experts, so over 100. And let me show you the different areas in the GDEIB. And so there's 15 categories and aligned with the foundation, so driving the strategy, attracting and retaining people, aligning and connecting your people, and then what are you doing externally to listen to and serve the community. So there's 15 different categories and concrete actions that can be taken. And then I wanted to give you an example of what one of these categories look like from a rubric standpoint. So let me get the right page there. Great. Okay, so this is category 1, vision, strategy, and business impact. And you can see it starts at level 1. So level 1 is inactive. There's no DEI vision, mission, strategy, anything in place. Then we go up to reactive, so getting a little better, we have something basic in place. Then we get up to proactive, so we have a defined DEI mission, vision, strategy, terminology. We have goals in place. We have compliance. Then we're getting to the next level. We're going into progressive, so things are embedded. Stakeholders are involved. And then finally, best practice. So this is really best in class. So DEI is integral to the overall strategy. It's embedded in the culture. It's proactive. So you can see if checking off these boxes helps you get a sense of where you fall on this 5-level scale. And I like to tell people when it comes to scales like this, when it comes to whether you call this a maturity model, I'm going to show you shortly Mattingly's readiness model. It's not a grade. It's just understanding a baseline of where you are now and what you can do next to get there. So let's say after assessing your organization, you realize you're a level 2. Okay, well, what do we do? What do we need to do now to get to a level 3? You're not jumping to a level 5. You're not jumping to level 5. You're jumping to level 3, right? So what can you do? Okay, let's put some goals in place, some quantifiable goals in place for DEI. Let's really develop a in-depth and detailed vision, mission, and strategy, right? So it's a roadmap to assess where you are and also what can you do next to get to where you need to be. So that is the GDEIB. And Martha, thank you so much for your comment. I will definitely share all the links in the chat. Just trying to multitask up here, but yes, I will absolutely share the links to the chat to those 4 resources that I just put out there. So just as 3 resources, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I've shared the Michigan Chamber of Commerce rubric. I've shared the DEI data-driven DEI resources from Dr. Pinkett's book, and I've shared the GDEIB with the caveat it is the one from 2021, so there will be an updated version coming out here soon. The 4th resource I wanted to share with you is our Inclusalytics workbook. So let me do that. Now it is meant to be a accompaniment to the book, so be sure to get the book if you haven't got that. We kept it really reasonably priced too. It's $19.99 for the softback, paperback. That's what we call that. And so what we did was we have one worksheet for each chapter of the book. And so it's just one application. It's not comprehensive. So there's plenty more in the book that can and should be done when it comes to building data-driven DEI strategies. But we wanted to have at least one activity in every chapter so you can practice and really start digging into the content and applying what you're learning. And so this gets us high level. And if you think about what I just showed you with the GDEIB, level 3 is having really clear definitions of what DEI is and articulating and communicating those definitions at your organization. Well, this is a great tool to help you start getting there. Right. So we share, this is like broad, why DEI matters, why inclusion matters. But here, this is how Mattingly, we define diversity, equity, and inclusion at a really high level. What does it mean at your organization? Right. So it really just gets you starting to think about how these terms should be defined. Helps you prepare to make the case for DEI to some of your stakeholders. Helps you think about where you could be collecting DEI data from. What are your possible data sources? I think when we hear DEI data, we sometimes think, oh, like we need to be collecting all this new data. And although sometimes that is the right move, other times you are sitting, oh my gosh, especially if you're watching this in HR, you are sitting on a pile of DEI data that you're probably just not using for DEI purposes. So this checklist is a way to start thinking about what are our untapped areas of DEI. I don't know if y'all can see my screen. I think I'm going on and no one can see my screen. So let's fix that. Well, I'm just going on about the workbook that you can't see on my screen. So download the workbook. I should have printed out a copy, but I was just sharing, hopefully the words I was sharing were helpful right there. So download the workbook. It's a really great supplement to the book, and I will be sure to share that link in the comments as well for you all. So those are some tools and resources that were requested. And I know we had a second part of that question, so let me pull that up again. That lovely question from Ashley. Oh, so what are the 3 to 5 readings or resources recommended when implementing DEI initiatives? So thank you again for that question, Ashley. The first, I'm just going to do a shameless self-plug, Inclusalytics. As I said, I've had so many people come up to me and said that this was such a great go-to guide for what they used to really start from the beginning. Like we really wrote this book for those who are getting started from scratch. If you're more advanced on your DEI journey, I would recommend a different book to you. But if you're just getting started and ready to start putting some hard metrics to your DEI work, I can't recommend Inclusalytics enough. And I can say that confidently by how many people have commented on that to me. So thank you for all of our Inclusalytics fans out there. That gives me the confidence to recommend the book. If you're a little further on your DEI journey, right, you've already started collecting data, you've been doing this work for a few years, and you're ready to take it to the next level, I would recommend Dr. Randall Pinkett's Data-Driven DEI. So it's a lot, even the size of the book, you can see it's a lot heftier. He really gets into a lot of the nitty-gritty work of doing data-driven DEI. So a really great resource. I strongly recommend this as well. And then my third book that I would recommend isn't necessarily DEI and data focus, but it is very comprehensive. Lily Zhang's DEI Deconstructed. Lily really breaks down not what DEI is. There's plenty of books. A lot of these books get at that, what DEI is, but how to do DEI well. And they are a very big stickler on accountability and making sure that we have the metrics, the data, the outcomes that we need to justify doing these efforts and how we do these efforts. So I really recommend DEI Deconstructed. So my 3 books, Inclusalytics, Data-Driven DEI, and DEI Deconstructed. Okay. So now let's go to our audience. What questions do y'all have? I see some people are tuning in live. Thank you so much for being here. What questions can I answer for you all about data-driven DEI? Go ahead, take a moment and think about the question. What issues are you facing at your organization? Let's have a brainstorming session. Let's really get into what can be helpful for you when it comes to data-driven DEI. Let's see if I have any questions I can pull up as well. Okay. So we have a question that came in. I'm going to put it in the chat so you can see it there. Okay. How do we start collecting data for DEI initiatives if we haven't done so before? And so I would say get started with the data that you have available. Most organizations have an engagement survey. Most organizations measure engagement. If you're not measuring engagement, start measuring engagement. There's a lot of research that shows that engagement absolutely impacts the bottom line, whether it's through decreasing turnover, increasing retention, better productivity, better profitability. So measure engagement. And if you already are measuring engagement, throw in some demographic variables. Or ideally, you can match it onto your HRIS data because you already have, most likely, if you're tuning in from the US, you already have gender, you already have race and ethnicity, you already probably have age, right? And because that engagement survey data can very quickly turn into DEI data when we slice it by those subgroups. For our training programs that we do, because everything we do at Mattingly is data-driven. So for our training programs, we're not able to do a big, hefty survey at the beginning of every training program that we do. So what we do instead is we ask one question before we ask our typical, knowledge and attitude and those types of questions. We ask one demographic question. Do you consider yourself a member of an underrepresented group? Now, we don't know if that's gender or race or sexual orientation or any of the other multitude of areas of diversity, right? But what we can do is see, are the unique learning needs of those from underrepresented groups different from those who don't see themselves as members of underrepresented groups? And if so, do we need to be offering 2 different training programs? Do we need to be doing a breakout where we say, if you identify as underrepresented group, we're going to do this breakout room for this audience, and we're going to talk about this for that audience, right? And so it doesn't have to be this huge undertaking. Now, of course, you can hire a firm like ours or do your own big hefty DEI survey. I think that is best practice, really getting at inclusive behaviors and feelings of belonging and all the different areas of diversity above the big 3. We need to be looking at caregiving status and neurodiversity and veterans and of course that's a good aspirational place. But think about those levels again from the GDEIB. If you're starting at a level 1, what's going to take you to a level 2? We're not trying to jump to a level 5. And so look at the data you already have. Look at the data that's already tied to demographic variables, and how can you then look at some outcomes? So not just what's your workforce distribution, but what's your leadership distribution by gender, by race, by age? What's your turnover rate? What's your retention rate? What's your promotion rate, right? What's your hiring rate? And look at it tied to the demographics that you already have. If you do an annual engagement survey, an annual culture survey, now is the time to start thinking about what demographic variables can we add in. And you're starting with the big 3, starting with race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, maybe age too. Those are some easy places to get started. And then how can you start building upon that as you go? Okay. So that's my answer of how to start collecting data. I have some more questions coming in, so let me put those up. Thank you, Martha, for coming in with a question. What advice do you have for communicating the initiation of a project when the organization is concerned that this work increases risk? This comes up all the time, especially when it comes to collecting DEI data. Oh, if we start surveying these different demographic groups, we're going to see problems that, we're going to uncover issues that aren't issues right now. Well, here's the thing, organizational leaders. They are issues right now. Just because we're not talking about them doesn't mean that you're losing people because of them. You're losing brilliant ideas. You're losing innovation. You're losing your top talent. And so I think a lot of this fear of, well, what if this thing happens? Well, it's already happening. And by going out and doing the work and spending that time and effort to do the work right, you're going to be showing that the organization cares about these issues and cares about its people. I also talk about Gen Z. I try not to talk about generations too much because that is not really supported by research. But let's say our youngest population in the workforce right now, they're demanding DEI. Maybe not DEI specifically, but having a values-based organization. So an organization that cares about stuff that they care about, and then that organization cares about them. And when it comes to DEI, there's no better way to show your people that you care about their unique experience as a multifaceted individual. And by that, I mean, we all have a gender, we all have a race, we all have a sexual orientation, we all have a caregiving status, even if we're not a caregiver, right? And so by showing, hey, we're doing DEI and we're going to do it right and do some measurement, we're indicating and signaling that we care about our people. And then finally, from a legal standpoint, now, I am not a lawyer, so definitely consult your counsel because I am not a lawyer. But when it comes to measuring DEI and if issues are found, as long as the organization does its due diligence to correct those issues, to close those gaps, they are not liable. So once again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't don't take that to the bank. But if you uncover issues and you do your due diligence to solve them, you're actually helping prevent lawsuits from happening rather than the other way around. So that's my answer to that question. Let's see what other questions we have. Just one moment. Here's another question. What are some common pitfalls to avoid when analyzing DEI data? I think as two immediately come to mind. One is not looking at intersectionality. And intersectionality is the interplay of multiple factors. And in the case of DEI, multiple identities. So not just looking at what is the woman's experience in this organization and what's the Black person's experience at the organization, but what's the Black woman's experience at this organization. So we need to be looking at those intersections to really understand what's going on. One of our clients, they were seeing some weird findings on belonging, which is a key outcome. And I can share a little bit about that in a moment. But they were finding with belonging, they had Black men, so they were doing their intersectional due diligence. Black men at the organization had lower levels of belonging compared to the rest of the organization. But then they took it a step further and they found it was Black men in a middle management role, right? So they were able to super isolate that very, very specific population. We ended up running some focus groups with that population to find out what's going on and, more importantly, what could be done to fix it moving forward. And like that is really how you get at the crux of what's happening and how to solve those problems. So a common pitfall, not looking at intersectionality, not looking at multiple levels. The second is related, but just looking at the data overall without slicing by anything. So looking at, oh, this is our overall workforce. This is our look how diverse we are. Look how many women we have. Look how many people from underrepresented groups we have. But then let's slice that data by job role. Why are the bulk of those underrepresented employees in administration roles? Why is that going on? Or where are all the women in leadership roles? Where did all the women go? We have 60% women working at our front line, and then we have 5% in the highest leadership ranks, right? So really getting at slicing the data in meaningful ways. So whether it's by job role, by leadership level, by function, thinking about pay equity, looking at pay. So I did want to share, I hope that answered your question there. I did want to share some research that we did here at Mattingly. So these are the key DEI variables. So when it comes to measuring DEI, if you're just getting started, focus on those first 5 areas. So diversity, what are your demographic variables? Not just the big 3, but looking at other variables as well. As I said, veteran status, neurodiversity, caregiving, is English a first language, age, and then equity is a little trickier. So sometimes I just recommend including perceptions of equity. So how fairly am I being treated at this organization? Am I part of decision-making processes? Do I have access to resources and tools I need to advance my career? So it's okay. I mean, ideally, we're assessing that with using like a GDEIB, but we can get at perceptions of equity as well and still learn a ton. And then inclusive behaviors. So I can't say that behavior part enough. Inclusion should be measured in terms of behaviors. And we found through our research, there's 2 different buckets of inclusive behaviors. There's those that employees, coworkers, colleagues exhibit, and there's those that leaders exhibit. So making sure that you're measuring all of those. So when it comes to diversity, perceptions of equity, and inclusive behaviors, both at coworkers and leadership levels, all these factors lead to beliefs of belonging, feelings of belonging. So I feel like I am valued, respected, seen, and heard at this organization. That is the key outcome variable that we split all of our data on here at Mattingly to assess, what are some important subgroup differences? What are these focus groups that we should conduct? Where are the biggest gaps? Now, that next side of the chart, that's one thing that get really interesting. Belonging has been found to predict attraction, meaning I'm more likely to work at an organization if I feel like I'm going to belong by being there, right? So talk about a competitive advantage to get top talent. Belonging also predicts engagement. And I shared earlier all the amazing bottom line outcomes that engagement has on an organization. And then finally, belonging predicts retention. So retention of keeping your people around, keeping your best people around, keeping your people from underrepresented groups around. Like, we can't get the benefits of diversity if we don't have the diversity to begin with. And so belonging should really be the focus of organizations, even though we need to measure all these different items to get the understanding of the full picture. So that's the one thing I wanted to share. And then I also wanted to quickly share our DEI readiness model. Now, this is very similar to the GDEIB. We go from 1, compliance, to 5, integration. Integration would be best practice. And people get, when we go through our audit, so we assess all the different areas of the organization to see, are these policies, practices, procedures in place, to really get at what a best practice DEI organization would look like. And then the organization gets this score. And so once again, just like the GDEIB, it's a way of understanding where you are right now and what you need to do to get to that next level. So I just wanted to share that as just another example of what an equity audit, what an overall organization DEIB. This is also available in Inclusalytics, so you can use this in the book as a real high level, or if you wanted to take a deeper dive, be sure to reach out. Okay, let's see what other questions we have going on in the chat. Thank you all for tuning in and bringing these questions. Here's a good one. All right, what strategies can we use to present DEI data effectively to leadership teams? And you need two big strategies. You need data and you need stories. You need a really compelling story in terms and metrics and concepts that the leadership team cares about. You cannot assume because you care about DEI that the leadership cares about DEI. What do they care about? What's on their strategic plan for this year? What metrics are they being held accountable for? And how can DEI help them achieve those metrics, achieve those goals? And then with the data, I find less is more, right? So what are just some like key data points, some like real like bring home the point of the story you're trying to tell. I found when I try to share too much data on the screen, we get lost in the woods, and where people are nitpicking little things, and why is this one slightly higher than that one, and is this statistically significant? And good questions, but questions that are just taking away from the point you're trying to make. So really having a strong story and good compelling data points to bring that story home, and say it in terms of things that they care about, really mapping it back to those organizational outcomes, those organizational goals, values as well. It doesn't always have to be bottom line. What's a company's core values and vision and mission, and how is DEI helping them achieve that? Okay. What other questions do y'all have? What other questions do y'all have that I can answer for you? I think we'll end on this one. Okay, how can data be used to foster a more inclusive company culture? I love this question because I feel like the term inclusion has got too fuzzy. It's become too squishy. It's why I am really focusing on inclusion as a behavioral construct, because behaviors, they can be trained, they can be observed, they can be measured because they can be observed. They can be added to performance evaluation, performance appraisal, 360s, competency models. And most importantly, people can be held accountable for behaviors. And so when we are talking about inclusion in terms of behaviors, we can say, and here's how we measure behaviors, right? We don't measure them about ourselves. I don't care if I think that I'm the most inclusive leader. I care that my people see me behaving consistently in inclusive ways, right? So how we can measure inclusive behaviors is I see my leader make space for others to speak during meetings. And it's not strongly agree to strongly disagree. It is never to always. So that way we're getting a little bit more objective, right? So say you have this inclusive behavior index, maybe there's like 10 behaviors on it. And remember, we want to have both coworker inclusion as well as leader inclusion. And you find that these 3 behaviors out of the 10 are the lowest scoring. And these 3 are the highest scoring. These 3 are happening almost always. These 3 are happening almost never. So what we can do then is build a whole year's worth of DEI training and content and development, and what people are working on with their mentors, all these different resources to help increase those 3 behaviors that are on the low end of the scale. So when we measure it that next year, we're seeing a difference. And as a result, we're having a more inclusive company culture because of that. We had one more question come in. I want to quickly answer it, and then I'm going to sign off unless you have any other questions you're going to throw in there. Itzel asks, why is cultural diversity important in the workplace? I mean, cultural diversity is important in the workplace for the same reason any area of diversity is important in the workplace. When we get people with different ideas, backgrounds, experiences, views on the world, we're going to getting better ideas. We're going to solve problems better. We're going to be more innovative. We're going to challenge others and their thinking to make them think more innovatively. And when it comes to cultural diversity or any area diversity, if you have with a culturally diverse workforce, you are going to be better able to serve a culturally diverse customer base. We know our groups, we know ourselves, right? And so if we can have people on the inside creating better products and services and experiences for their people on the outside, then it's going to be a better product service experience as a result. So cultural diversity is so important. It should be not tolerated, but celebrated. An organization that does this right is going to win in the end in all the ways, not just financially, but culturally, values-wise. So I can't say enough how important cultural diversity is in the workplace. Trying to think if I have anything else for you all. Any other final questions coming in? Thank you for those who shared the questions here today. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to share the links to the resources I shared in the caption. So keep an eye out for that. And then if you have additional questions that come up after watching this video, be sure to just plunk those in the comments and I'll try to answer those, and we can start a conversation there. But I hope this was a valuable 42 minutes for y'all who tuned in. Please let me know in the comments that was the case. Or if not, what I can do better next time. But thank you for all you do to take a more data-driven approach to DEI. Your organization will be better because of it. And